Genesis 18. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground and said, My Lord, if you have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. I let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts after ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant? And they said, So do as thou hast said. And Abraham hastened into the tent of Sarah and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon thee heareth. And Abraham ran unto the herd and fetched it, and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man. And he hasted to dress it, and he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after her manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed with herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, I of surely bear a child, which I am old? Is there anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed, I will return unto thee according to the time of life. And Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laugh not, for she was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh. The cities in plain. And the men rose up from thence and looked towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of earth shall be blessed in him. For I know that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that he hath spoken of him. And the Lord said, Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is to come unto me. And if not, I will know. And the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy thy righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for 50 righteous that there are in? that be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked, that as far from thee that be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which I am but dust and ashes. Peradventure there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all the city for the lack of 5? And he said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. And he spake unto him yet again and said, peradventure there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 40's sake. And he said unto him, oh, let not the Lord be angry, I will speak. Peradventure shall there be 30 found there. And he said, I will not do if I find 30 there. He said, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. Peradventure shall there be 20 found there. He said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, O Lord, and he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, I will speak yet, but this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And the Lord went his way as soon as he had left the communicating with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his palace, his place. Genesis 18 is a stunningly cinematic, multi-layered chapter that serves as a direct bridge between the intimate family promises of Abraham and the catastrophic global judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. The chapter splits cleanly into 2 profound encounters: the ultimate act of desert hospitality, verses 1 through 15, and the grand intercession of justice, verses 16 through 33. The chapter opens up on a sweltering hot day at the plains of Marim. Abraham is sitting at his tent door trying to escape the midday heat when he looks up and suddenly sees 3 men standing nearby. Abraham doesn't just greet them, he sprints out to meet them, bows to the ground, and begs them to stay for a rest. What follows is the textbook definition of ancient Near Eastern hospitality. He washes the dust-covered feet. He tells Sarah to quickly bake bread using 3 measures of fine flour, an enormous, extravagant amount. He runs to the herd just like choice tender calf to be slaughtered and cooked. The narrator lets the reader in on a secret right away. Verse 1, and the Lord appeared unto him. One of these 3 travels is the physical manifestation of Yahweh himself, often understood in theology as Theophany, accompanied by 2 angels. What? In nomadic culture where travelers completely relied on kindness of strangers to avoid dying in the desert, Abraham's hospitality is flawless. It stands in the direction of deliberate contrast to the horrific treatment the angels will receive when they walk into Sodom in the very next chapter. Sarah turns to laugh. While guests are eating under the shade of the tree, the Lord asks, "Where is Sarah, thy wife?" He then drops the definitive timeline: "Sarah, thy wife, shall have a son." Sarah is listening intently from inside the tent curtain right behind them, knowing her body is long past menopause and Abraham is 100 years old. She laughs within herself, thinking, "Am I waxed old shall have pleasure? My Lord being old as also?" The Lord hears her silent, internal laugh and asks Abraham a question that echoes across the rest of the biblical history. Is anything too hard for the Lord? When confronted, Sarah panics and lies, saying, "I laugh not," but the Lord calmly corrects her, "Nay, but thou did laugh." As we saw in chapter 17, the child's name will be Isaac. He laughed, meaning God laughed, a permanent monument to both Abraham's stunned joy and Sarah's human skepticism. In verse 17, as the visitors stood up and looked towards the valley of Sodom, God paused and said something incredibly intimate. "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do?" God's explanation why he wants to include Abraham in his governance decision, because Abraham is called the teacher to his children to do justice and judgment. God announces that he is going down to investigate Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sin is very grievous. This language frames God not as an erratic pagan deity smashing cities on a whim, but as a fair supreme judge conducting a thorough legal investigation before educating sentence. The chapter reaches a soaring climax in verses 23 and through 33. The two angels walk down towards Sodom, but Abraham stands firmly in front of the Lord and initiates the first major theological debate in divine justice in history. Abraham asks bold, cutting questions. Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Abraham begins historic high-stakes piece of marketplace bargaining with the creator of the universe to save the city where his nephew Lot lives. What if 50? What if 45? What if 40? What if 30? What if 20? What if 10? This extraordinary window into Abraham's character does not just care about his own family. He's acting as a priest for total strangers, pleading for mercy for a notoriously wicked city. God reveals that he would gladly spare an entire religion of ungodly people for the sake of just 10 good men. The tragedy, as you'll see the moment you turn the page to chapter 19, is that Sodom cannot even meet that remarkably low bar. Wow. So the three men that came to Abraham's tent were God and two angels. Yes, you've got it exactly right. The text indicates that the three travelers were the Lord Yahweh appearing in human form, accompanied by two angels. We know this because of how the narrative splits them up later at the end of chapter 18. The Lord finishes talking with Abraham and departs. And the opening line of chapter 19 explicitly states, "And there were two angels, and there came two angels to Sodom at even." This phenomenon, where the invisible, infinite God takes visible, tangible form to interact with two humans, is called theophany, from the Greek word theos, meaning God, and theon, theano, meaning to appear. To understand how this works and why it matters so much in the Old Testament, we have to look at the mechanisms behind the divine appearances. Throughout the Bible, there is a consistent theological rule. God is spirit, invisible, infinite, and so radiant that no mortal human can look directly at his raw glory and survive. Exodus 33:20. A theophany is God's way of stepping across that barrier. Think of it as God putting on a human suit or downshifting his infinite frequency so that human senses can process him without being overwhelmed. In Genesis 18, this downshifting is incredibly radical. God doesn't just appear as a booming voice from a cloud or a burning bush. He acts completely human. He walks through the dusty heat. He lets Abraham wash the dirt off his feet. He sits down under a shaded tree and physically eats the beef, butter, milk, and bread that Abraham and Sarah prepared. This shows God who is not cold, detached, or locked away in a distant heaven. He is deeply personal, relational, and willing to humble himself to sit in the dirt and have lunch with a human friend. That's awesome. When you read through Genesis and the rest of the Old Testament, you will often run into a very specific puzzling character called the angel of the Lord. In Hebrew, Malek Yahweh. The word angel in ancient Hebrew simply means messenger. But look closely at how the specific messenger talks and acts in the texts. The identity constantly blurs between a messenger sent by God and God himself. Phase 1, the character is introduced as an angel of the Lord. Looks like a man speaks for God. Phase 2, the character suddenly shifts from speaking in the first person, I will multiply your seed. Phase 3, the human observer panics and realizes I have seen God face to face. We saw this exact puzzle back in Genesis 16 with Hagar. The angel of the Lord met her at the well, but by the end of the conversation, Hagar explicitly states that she was speaking directly to El Roi, the God who sees. Other famous theophanies in the Bible, Genesis 18 as a part of a grand pattern where God uses physical elements, human forms, or intense natural forces to make himself present to his people. Genesis 32, Jacob wrestles with God. Abraham's grandson Jacob gets locked into a literal physical wrestling match all night with a man. By sunrise, the man renames him Israel, and Jacob declares, I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. The burning bush in Exodus 3, Moses encounters a bush that is burning but is consumed. The text says the angel of the Lord was in the bush, but then God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and revealed his holy name, Yahweh. And then in Exodus 13, the pillar of the cloud of fire during Exodus, God guides the nation of Israel through the wilderness by manifesting a massive visible pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. For centuries, both Jewish and Christian scholars have wrestled with these passages. Christian theology, these Old Testament appearances often given a specific name, Christophanies. Many theologians argue that whenever God takes a visible human form in the Old Testament, it is a pre-incarnation appearance of Jesus, the Son, the Word of God, before he was officially born in Bethlehem. The argument is that since the New Testament states that no man hath seen God, the Father at any time, the only begotten Son, he hath declared him. These moments were these moments where Abraham, Hagar, and Jacob physically interact with the human God are previews of God permanently becoming a human being later in history. Whether viewed as a temporary angelic manifestation or early previews of the incarnation of Theophany in Genesis 18, sets up a beautiful truth for the rest of the Abraham story. God values human relationships so deeply that he is willing to walk down the road, step into a regular tent, and talk through life's biggest questions face to face with us. That is awesome. Theophany, the visible or tangible manifestation of a deity to a human, derived from the Greek word for God, theos, and to appear, theophany, in terms is the most frequently used in religious and mythological contexts, particularly within ancient texts and Abrahamic traditions.